For millions of Africans, this was the last place they saw of their homeland. For centuries, these walls held hundreds of captives. Today, we step inside the very chambers where history was written, in blood, sweat, and tragedy. This is Cape Coast Castle, brought to you by Trip Coach.
The dungeon those days had no light. So once they were brought in here, the 3 holes that you are seeing up there would provide them with light and also serve as their source of ventilation. We are having 5 chambers in here, and from the first down to the 5th chamber, we estimate about 700 to 1,000 humans filling these 5 spaces if it was fully loaded. So mathematically, each chamber could pick about 150 or more of them. But then get to know they were raided, they were kidnapped, hunted through warfare. So the place wouldn't always be filled with captives. Most often, I would say the numbers probably could be within 100 or less. But then because of the conditions they had in here, not all of them were to make it out of this point. Because once they were brought in, they expect them to defecate, urinate, sleep, and sometimes eat in here. A lot of these captives got sick because keeping them in the dungeons, communicable disease easily would spread amongst them. And aside that, the unhygienic condition would add up to the illness. Cholera, malaria, fever, diarrhea, and others. If you were to die in the dungeons, get to know there wouldn't be any befitting burial for you. The bodies will be loaded in sacks. They add cannonballs to give it weight, will dump all these bodies into the ocean. So the sea out there happens to be mass burial for a lot of the Africans that died in here. If you are to look on the floor, you'll probably get to see some trenches or drainage system which served as passage for waste in here to move into the sea, mostly expecting rainwater as well to wash off some of the waste. But then we ask ourselves, how often would it rain? And even if it was to rain, there wouldn't be enough force moving the waste. So the domestic captives were those assigned to be cleaning the place, and they were not doing that on regular basis. Before they come in here, some might have stepped on the poop and other stuff, making them stuck on the floor. So what they could get from this place, they do so. The rest, they cover them with sand, and that started creating layers in the dungeon. The year 1974, we had some group of archaeologists from the University of Ghana. This group came in, had this place excavated, discovered the bricks as the original floor of the dungeons, and that made them move samples of what they got from this place to their lab. And after the testing, the results that came out proves that, please, I wish you go back a little. So the results they had proves the little portion that they left here, as well as everything we work on from the 2nd down to the 5th chamber happens to be the toilet, the vomit, the sweat, the blood, the food particles. So things that humans mostly would excrete, eject from their system, mixed with sand, food, blood, is what we see here. We work on in the other chambers. And they left these areas unexcavated just as a proof, so that if you don't believe, you could also get samples to test as to whether they contain DNAs or not. Once these captives were brought into the dungeons, the expectation was that they stayed here minimum just a day, but the maximum you could stay in almost or over 3 months, because until ships were ready, you probably wouldn't leave the castle. Out of the 5 chambers here, only the first one had a gate, because those that were kept in this room were mostly seen to be the aggressive ones, and most often they were those that were kept in chains, making sure they wouldn't be fighting officers when they were in to inspect or probably bring them food. The male dungeons. Question, comment, if you have any, you let me know. If not, we go down this way. All right, so I made mention they had the first chamber excavated, leaving the other 4. But then looking at where I stand in between my legs, moving up that way, you'll be seeing some of the bricks popping up due to erosion, telling us that if you are to excavate this place, there should be bricks filling the whole space, just as we saw in the first chamber. So whatever that you stand on now happens to be the toilets, the vomit, the sweat, the blood, the food particles over the years piled up with the sand. And this happens to be the level of the bricks, which is to tell us from this point up here happens to be the thickness of the waist. So over 190 years, they stopped using this place as a dungeon. We still could get waist as thick as we see there. Then just imagine when the captives were staying down here, how high the waist probably would have been. And I'm sure they wouldn't be this solid as we stand on. The more softer they were, probably would be producing heat and sickness in here. You join me in the last chamber. All right, so this happens to be the last chamber. And this place was also used for the selection of the captives. Because of the conditions down here, not all of them actually were that fit to make it out of this end. So when their ships were ready, those seen extremely weak were kept at the extension over there. The rest were grouped in chains. They forced them through a tunnel connecting this place to the door or the gate of no return. So you'd enter this way, but they would exit from this point. It's unfortunate we wouldn't go through the tunnel today, because in the year 1834, Captain George McLean, who was the administrator or the president of the merchant, was asked to block this tunnel, symbolizing the English ending slavery here. But then practically, they were still smuggling them until 1860s, because historically, the last ship left Benin to Alabama 1860, telling us in between these periods, they were still smuggling the Africans. Having blocked the tunnel they had here should tell us this was not part of the dungeon system, because if there should be a tunnel, this thing wouldn't be there to block them. But then before the land was given to the first group to trade here, the natives had a deity they were worshipping, they called Nana Tabil, which was in the form of a rock. But then having given the land out, they were asked to leave this place. So they left with 2 sections of the rock to the town. The castle we see here was officially given to Ghanaians in 1960. That was when Ghana became a Republican country. In 1973, the stones were brought back. So today, those that still believe in the traditional system, they do come in here to worship. Over there, you would see wreaths. And these wreaths were brought in by visitors like yourself. I made mention if you were to die in here, the body moves into the sea. And for us, we have the belief that the souls are still here. So when visitors bring them, we don't litter the sea, rather we keep them in places like this to honor, respect, remember the dead. So when you see them anywhere, they serve the same purpose. If there is no question, let's see the next place. We stand in front of a condemned cell, and the cell we are seeing here was designed for the males. You know, a lot of the Africans that were brought here were warriors from their tribes. So when they were brought out of the dungeons to work, some would want to fight the officers for their rights, others too would want to escape from this place. Doing that, they were seen to be rebellious, and for that, rebellious ones had to be killed to deter others from escaping or fight them. So in the presence of other captives, whilst working out there, they got them beaten before they moved them into the cell, with 3 doors blocking them. In there, no food, no water, no air, and no light. So you get dehydrated, you suffocate, and then you die in there. But then the sad aspect is, let's say we are about 5 or 10 sent in there at the same time. The soldier that is assigned at the gate, his duty was to be sure all those in there were dead before the bodies move out. So if I'm to walk in there, realize, let's say this section were dead, leaving just the 4, I wouldn't take the dead ones out. I wait till the last person in there was dead. The bodies will be laid on the floor for others to see it, so that next time, if you are to repeat the same thing, remembering what you saw there deters you from escaping or fight them. Then they dump the bodies into the sea. So it was more of a psychological way of controlling the captives. We are moving in to have a feel of the place. Please get to watch your head coming in there. This is the only original door that we have left in this castle. So any other door you are to see or window has been restored. Please, watch your head and join me in the cell. Luckily for us today, there's no door here, no door in the middle. The first door itself open, but I'm sure we still feel the heat. So imagine having 1 or 2 doors blocking us. Like I said, until the last person in here was dead, nobody gets to leave this place. That is why today some prefer calling this end the room of no return, because you would enter as a living being but then only dead bodies are to be taken out of this place. The room we are standing in was actually a storage chamber, including all the rooms that you see down here. But then with the intentions of using here as a condemned cell, that made them add these two doors and block the door that they had over there, so that when you get in here, there wouldn't be any place to escape to. We sit or stand inside the palaver hall. And if you remember, I made mention once the captives were brought to the castle, they had a chamber where nurses, doctors first would get them examined, group them into domestic and commercial slaves, then they march them forward. So the merchants in here, according to your physique and your strength, would help them decide as to whether they should auction you with the gunpowder, the mirror, the alcoholics and other things they had in here. Then they move them to the courtyard for them to be branded. So where we are actually seated happens to be the auctioning or the marketplace. This same room that we stand is where some 8 coastal chiefs also met with Commander Hill, who was the then governor of this castle, Captain George McLean, the administrator or the judicial assessor, and also some 2 other English officials to sign the bond of 1844, the same bond that laid foundation for our colonization for 113 good years. So when you're talking about slavery, in here you can't take away this room, and as we're talking about colonization, you can't do away this room as well. The floors, the ceilings, the doors and windows that you are seeing here, everything has been restored. The only thing that we came to meet in here happens to be at the edges. You will see some black ceilings there. Apart from that, whatsoever that you are seeing here happens to be restored or changed. So if you have any question, comment, or contribution, you would let me know. If not, then let's see where the governor was staying. Please, this way. Up here, we just compare the governor's living room to what we saw in the dungeons. The type of vent the captives were having and what one person is having here. The breeze coming in, the view of the sea, the natural lighting, everything surrounding one person should tell us he was enjoying life. And aside having the space as his living room, he had the bedroom over there. So let's see the bedroom as well. All right, so the living room of the governor is having 9 windows. The bedroom is having 5. His corridor having 2. So one person staying here had 16 windows surrounding him. And if you are to check the vents in the dungeons, if you sum up all the 9 vents in the 5 chambers, you wouldn't even get a complete window like this. But then one person was having 16 of them surrounding him. And you probably could get almost a 360 look all over the castle, where the soldiers stayed, the land view, the sea view, and the courtyard of the castle also from this point. So whatever that was happening around him, he probably staying here would see it. Aside having the bed and the living room, he had his office and a reception underneath us. So please, let's see that as well. The governor's reception area. Here he would receive visitors. They do their drinking, would entertain them in this room. And the smaller chamber over there was the personal office. So one person appointed as a governor would have an office, a reception, a living, and a bedroom. Right underneath us, this section moves a little bit out, happens to be the first chamber of the male dungeons. The second, the third, which is the church. Fourth and fifth moves this way. Just that when you were up here, you probably wouldn't hear anything that was coming from the dungeons because of the thickness of the wall. But in the church, you see, you smell, and hear everything as well. Please, we go down this way. We stand in front of a church, and the name of the church was the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. SPG, today we call that same church the Anglican Church or Church of England. Moving in and out of the church, whatever that was happening in the dungeons, you would smell, you would hear, and get to see it. right here. So those that were with us in the dungeon, to remember moving out at the third chamber, I pointed to a hole saying you would see, smell, and hear everything. So that is the hole right in front of the gate to the church. At the point, this same place became a school. But then the school was not designed for purely Africans, neither purely Europeans. It was made for the mixed race. The kids that they had with the blacks were those that were brought up here to be educated. Some of them moving in, out as well, got brainwashed, became slave merchant here. Today, it no longer serves as a church nor a school. Rather, it operates as a library, as you can all see right up there. And surprisingly, it is not only Cape Coast that they were doing this. Almost all the castles and some forts had churches above dungeons. This castle alone had the Anglican church starting here, the Wesley Methodist at the forecourt. If you are to visit Elmina Castle, you would see the Catholic Church right above a slave market. The Dutch took over Elmina Castle, and the Dutch formed part of the Protestants, built a church above the female dungeons. You visit Osu, you would see the Presbyterian Church as well there. And if you came from Accra, on your way about 28 minutes before you get to Cape Coast, there's a fort with the name Amsterdam. Amsterdam also had a church right above the male dungeon. So most of these churches were situated right on top of the dungeons until later they got to the town as well. If there is no question, let's see the door or the gate of no return. Through the tunnel, this was the exit point. So just as they had the entrance of the tunnel blocked, the same date the exit also got blocked, 1834. Per the design of this castle, the door of no return was supposed to be at this point. But then they had the door blocked or because the sea was coming in from this direction. So that made them block this one, create a new one over there so that when the males walk out, they would join the females and all of them would exit from this point. So please, let's proceed a little. All right, so this happens to be the female punishment cell. A lot of the Europeans coming here were not coming with their wives. So whenever they wanted to satisfy themselves sexually, they would move into the female dungeons, pick any lady of their choice to abuse or rape her. If you were that brave to resist and fight back, they will keep you here for some days just to get a change of mind. So that next time, if they come back to pick you or anybody in there, probably the person would give in. Staying in this cell, a metal gate should block you from escaping. The smaller hole in there, they would ease themselves, talking about the poop, the urine, and others. Unlike the males that had no food nor water, females were given food, water, and probably would get air. But then after you've served your days, you move back to your normal duties. Not all of them actually were willing to stay in here, because the dungeon itself was not easy for them not to isolate and bring them into this chamber. So some of them would give in and get to know a female would only get a wash in the castle if you accept rape. So for that, you allow yourself, they move you up there, they wash you and take you to bed. After being raped, they were brought back to the dungeons. Some of these females were seen pregnant because the shit probably would delay for some time. And once they see you pregnant, they take you from the dungeon, take care of you so you give birth. After delivery, the mother is allowed to breastfeed for some months until they see the mother and the baby fit. They separate them. The mother should be brought back for the next available she take care from this place. But then the babies were for them, and these babies, they had nannies to take care of them so that when they grow, they would bring them to the church. So remember I said they had some mixed race brought up there. It was those kids. During and as well after the trade, some left this place, others stayed behind. That is why here in Ghana, if you mostly check our coastal areas from Volta region, moving to Western, we have a lot of European surnames. So commonly from Accra to Volta, you hear names like Morgan, Van der Poel, Van Dyke, Wales, Wolves, and others. From Central to Western, you hear names like Swansea, Smith, William, Wilberforce, McCarthy, McLean, de Graft, and others. A lot of them here happens to be descendant of the mixed race. But then others adapt the Western names and some corrupt African names into European names, especially when you come to the fancy lands. Here, names like Yolsin, Kumsin, Agri, Blanksin, and others are all indigenous names also corrupted to the Western names as well. All right, so the door or the gate of no return. Originally, the door or the gate of no return was a very short and narrow one, designed for one person to fit at a time. So you can't move in by standing as well, probably would have to go down before he could fit through the door they had here. And Cape Coast is having a bigger door all because the English themselves at the point made this town the capital city of Gold Coast. The castle we see here became their administrative quarters, so that made them expand the door for goods to be moving in out of this place, and we still maintain the door that they left for us here. Africans that moved out of this door never returned. Walking out of the door means you lose your right as a human being, you lose your connection with your people, you get to lose your inheritance and also lose your identity. The Africans would use the door or the gate of no return. The Europeans rather had their own bigger door, so they wouldn't use this door to exit, rather the bigger one, meet them, journey them onto the canoes into the bigger ships. And that was where some of them were jumping into the sea to commit the suicide. Because of the European activities going on within and around this area, they demarcated a place meant for only Europeans. They named this whole site as Europeans Beach. Today, they use the same area as a fishing village, but then they still get to maintain the old name. Locally, they call this place Abrofo Mpoano, meaning the same thing as Europeans Beach as well. When you look over there, you'll see the door of return, which is to tell us we are all to return back to where we came from. I'm sure almost everyone here knows the meaning of Akwaba. Akwaba here means welcome, and we have it here all because we see this door as a pilgrimage. Because for many years, humans like all of us had their footprints here, but they couldn't return back. So for you to walk out of the same door and return, the best we can do is to welcome you into the castle. That is why we have this plaque here. We end the tour now. I always do say the best person that should be narrating the history should be the structure, because the castle that we are seeing here got to experience all I'm saying. None of us were born those days to know exactly what happened in this structure. There is the possibility that it never happened as I'm narrating, or probably it was worse to the extent that authors couldn't put them all in write-ups, so we would also research from them. In here, we don't frame stories to create any psychological trauma in anyone's mind. Neither are we inciting anyone to go out there to fight others, nor to grudge others. Neither are we saying that they should cause segregation among races nor tribes. But we want each and everyone that makes it to this castle to know the inhuman act, to know the crimes and the atrocities that happened some years back, so the living can get to learn from the past. Because now we keep claiming that slavery ended 1860s. Deep in all of us, we know we still live with the system. It has been modernized into different forms, different structures, having given different names. Africa here, we know of tribalism, we know of colorism, we know child labor, economic and slavery, gender imbalance and all that. In the world, we all know of racism, we know of imperialism, we know caste system, this neo-colonial system and others. A living being, if you wouldn't want yourself enslaved, then never get yourself involved in any slavery activity. It happened to others, it can happen to anyone here. Let's become agents of change, regardless of our race, our tribes, our gender, our religious beliefs. We are all humans. So what you would wish for yourself, if it is good for mankind, then I believe others deserve the same thing. But then most importantly, we should never forget about the past. The past is there to guide us. So we forgetting the past, the same mistakes that our ancestors made are also likely to repeat itself over and over again. So ladies, gentlemen, it was nice having you here in the Cape Coast Castle. We end the journey here. Thank you for coming.
Book your private or group tours with Trip Coach